like to call the finance order on Monday, June 2025 at 1:08 p.m. Call Berto here.
Housen here.
Laskowitz here. Russell here.
White here.
Is there a motion to the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Housen,
Second.
second by Laskowitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Is there a motion to March 10th, 2025 minutes as presented, or are there any corrections, comments?
I have none.
I have a question for Vlad. On page 4, it said budget development and management policy, management procedure number 10, which states that funds are committed and released by a resolution. Berto asked if this could be done by a means other than a resolution, and Gannick will inquire with the village's consultants. Did you get an answer to that yet? Page 4. Do you remember what it was? I know, okay. Follow up with me. Okay. And just a clarification from the Personnel Committee on the item right below that on 9, talking about the step system for payroll. And Housen added that it is not necessarily a procedure that will continue forever.
I don't know if I actually said forever, but we didn't.
I mean, what
What did I mean?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
does that mean?
I'm not aware of any motion that was put in place relative to the STEP program that said that this is, officially our
Policy?
policy. I'm not aware that, Julie, unless you are prior to Mike, I'm not aware of any vote that took place that said, we want to make this policy for a period of time or until change.
Yeah, there's nothing that says this for a definite period of time. No, we do have the employee handbook, which references that you're provided you have a successful evaluation,
Yep.
you'll go up per the compensation schedule. So it is implied in there. Anything we do change, it just.
Right, we can change the employees, but that was so it indefinitely may have been a better way to say it. I honestly don't remember if I said forever. I'd have to listen to the recording
Okay.
if it was recorded.
So can we adjust the minutes then with that clarification that with the village is using it currently
It is. correct.
and that it also references it in the employee handbook?
Sure.
Okay.
Kind of says that after that, says Schmelzer added that the use of the wage schedule currently matches the language of the personnel employee handbook.
But that's talking about COLA. So, and I was talking about
She's talking about that. Yeah, we could say basically the same language for the STEP program.
So as long as we can clarify that moving forward.
Yeah, because the COLA is the same, it's the same situation.
Anybody have anything else?
I read them, wasn't at the meeting, so.
Is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Motion by Housen,
Second.
Laskowitz, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public. Okay. We have one person. Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. Does anybody hear an echo?
It's on the owl, I
Is
think.
there, it's either on the owl or that laptop?
Well, the laptop could be
Is it?
muted, maybe.
I know that sounds so silly, but it is so.
No, I heard one.
Yeah, I was like, is that gonna record weird? Everything.
Okay, discussion and action items. 6A, update on 2024 year-end actual to budget.
So I know last year, there was a request, some people wanted to see the actual to year end. And it's hard because we have to wait, of course, till the auditor goes through and approves everything, and it takes, we're always way behind, right? So Q1 was done in April and we're first getting those numbers all finalized now. But Vlad put this together and Vlad can explain it, answer any questions about it. It does begin on page 7.
I think for the sake of time, I think we're all smart enough to know what we read, unless there are specific questions.
Well, I have a specific question if we're gonna go there. And Vlad, first meeting, so, please don't be kind, just tell me if I'm not getting this, but as I look at the year-end results for 2024, all
What
in,
page, are you referencing a certain page?
no, I'm referencing, both Vlad's document and, let's see if it's in here, no.
So the
it's
recap
not.
starts on page 7, so you're looking at the basically executive summary, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at the executive summary, but I took this right off of the financial, and it's in the audit report, basically the general fund financials.
Okay.
And,
What page of the audit report?
well, let me just ask the question and we'll decide if we need a page or not, because I got a feeling you'll know this number. I was surprised that the fiscal year end surplus was $557,000. And when we were developing the budget and figuring the tax plan for this year, we had a hole of, I don't remember, Denise, was it $350,000 was basically why we had to increase the property taxes 11%. But we then ended the year 3 months after we developed the plan for 25 with a 26 surplus of almost $560,000. Do I understand that correctly is my question?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
that is correct.
So we put ourselves through a lot of pain, maybe unnecessarily. Is that accurate?
It is.
Yes and.
Yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but you want to be prepared in case everything does come in at 100%.
But my argument would be 2 months before the end of the fiscal year, when we looked at the category of expenses that we were underspent on, which it was all very good work by our department heads, it seems as though we should have known that.
Yeah, but here's the thing, there were transfers from TID into general fund, which is like $440,000.
So was my next question. So we didn't have a forecast of that transfer in at the time?
We did, but not additional 150. And also when you forecast in the TID, that's when we run in this situation when our operational budget backfired on us, became like at the end, it ended up to be like 10.8% higher than actual budget because the fluctuation in the TID values like ended up to be much higher than projected. So as what Adam is suggesting, put like a reverse formula back at the end of each budget. So we're going to include operational levy, the amount that we need to run the operation for the village, and then just take the TID increment out. And by taking the TID increment out, whatever gonna be left over, that's we're gonna be budgeting for in our operational. So knowing that.
I'm sorry I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, and we don't have to have an answer here, but I think the point is that mostly in the general fund under operational spending, we need to, one, acknowledge that the department heads did a very good job of managing their budgets, and I believe at least $400,000 of that $557,000 was operational expenses below budgeted amounts that were in the 24 plan. So very good execution. My point is, and you just kind of hinted at why we might have the problem. We're just now looking at the first quarter data. The second quarter just finished, so I wouldn't expect to see that yet. But I don't think you have to wait until the auditors review the numbers to produce a pro forma. That's how other communities do it. It's basically a pro forma, and you note it as an unaudited report. So one suggestion is, before we set the budget for 26, we really need to know what's going on in 25 and do our best to forecast. And to your point, Julie, we probably have to put some padding in there to make sure that we don't plan too leanly. But the last thing we want to do is be raising taxes when we don't necessarily have to raise property taxes on our residents. That's kind of the first point. The second point on the TID, Andy's coached me a little on TIDs, but I'm still learning. And we'll look at that. I think we have another action item today to talk a little bit about the TIDs. I know the board had a detailed review and I've reviewed your documents. I can't call myself an expert on TIDs and TIPs yet. Maybe it wasn't on this agenda, but I can get smarter on that outside of this meeting if necessary.
We have another meeting at 5.
Okay. Okay. So I guess just to summarize, my ask is, and I think I'm representing a lot of members of the community, that before we go setting a budget for 26, especially if we see that that budget is leading to any increase in property taxes, that we carefully analyze how we performed in 25, and we don't increase taxes just to hedge. We've got to have solid numbers and a reasonable forecast that tells us it's necessary. And if it's not necessary, I don't see why we would be raising property taxes next year.
We do that. It may not be a pro forma per
Mhm.
se, but we have, as we work through this, we have actuals up to the time when we
I-
have those
And
conversations.
I've seen them because you put them in file. I looked at them pretty closely last year. I think at least twice they were produced last year that I saw in the website. I agree with that. Okay,
So out of $440,000, only $150,000 were additional transfer in due to the increase in increment.
and TID.
Yeah, and that's at the end of the audit. Was suggested by audit team to bring this money in. And like ongoing scheduling of repay probably increasing every year. I guess during the presentation, during board of review at 5 o'clock, Adam probably can answer some of those questions.
Okay. All right, if we're still open to questions, there was one other one I had related to the audit, and if that's outside of this agenda today, I'll skip it.
If I can answer without the audit team, I.
Well, the other point that I noticed in the audit is there's a slide that the auditor included that gets into detail on our category of expenses and increases. I think in the audit, it's audit page 17. And it shows fund balances, government funds. And if this is not appropriate, Vlad, I'll take this offline, but I'd like to have a little better explanation of this, because what jumps out at you is, and as a finance person, you always look at where the numbers are dramatically changing, right?
I don't see it on page 17.
Yeah,
Sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you.
Maybe it's page 18 then. It's fund balances, government funds. I printed this out, which is the report from the auditor that I think was reviewed at the last board meeting. It's basically a bar chart. It's from the PowerPoint presentation that auditors presented. Yeah, page, I think that says 18.
Probably
Yeah,
attached to the
just
meeting.
the PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, it's a PowerPoint slide for
Yes, it's not
Amy.
much.
So I guess there's, and this is just to kind of set the stage for us to think as we set the budget for next year. There's a couple of interesting points here. One, in 24, it looks as though we saw a fall off of the premier resort tax. So that I'm assuming that means the revenue that we have from hotel and short-term rental taxes it fell off last year. I guess it's to determine if that's a trend or not, but that's one point. The second point is there was a jump up in TID1 expenses, capital projects. Really, I mean, they went up 4 times. And debt service increased dramatically. I just was wondering, I didn't see any commentary on the part of the auditor, and when an auditor looks at data and produces a slide like this, usually what they're doing is they're doing it to highlight an issue or an opportunity. They're trying to tell us something as to why those numbers are changing so dramatically, and I was wondering what their storyline was.
Yeah, they did mention, so the debt service, why it kind of jumped all over, because we borrowed to pay back while we still had money on hand. So, for example, we had $4 million sitting while we borrowed another $4 million to pay it back in January, or maybe 3.3. The broadband loan. So there was overlap, and since all of that happened in 2024, it had to be counted, and that's why capital project jumped out to 8 million, and the debt service jumped out so high. Because there was overlap of borrowing.
Short-term borrowing, permanent borrowing.
I get that, but the debt expense as a line item in our operational expense, did it also increase 4 times? 3 times?
No, it should not have.
Okay, so is this not really a debt service number? Because the debt service would typically be the expenses or the cost of the bonds and the borrowed amount. And then it would be divided by the periods that you're amortizing it over.
So because it's all overlap happening the same year, that's why technically it increased, but it didn't until it paid back in January.
Okay, I don't want to prolong this. Those were things that I didn't quite understand.
So back in 2023, when the funds were borrowed, then in 2024 they were scheduled to for refinancing, and some of the refinancing happened in 2024, but some of them kind of dropped out on the second day of 2025.
I'll take this offline because it sounds like you're talking about a grossed up number, not the actual period expense.
But they factored those in.
Okay, let's just take it offline. I think when you look back at the last couple of years, debt expense from our capital spending and operational and any spending that we have is a growing cost in our general fund. The other concern is the TIDs. They can be tricky, we all know. And I think we all need to understand what the impact of the TIDs are on property taxes and what the impact of the TIDs are in terms of our debt service. Those are a couple of important questions. I think the committee should try and make sure we become a bit smarter on as time goes on here. And I'll just leave it at that.
Another thing to mention, Amber and Elizabeth, when they provided that PowerPoint, they said if you have any questions, you can reach out.
Yeah, I'll call.
So
That's a good idea. Thank you.
you're welcome. But as far as I'm recalling,
Oh.
that was the issue.
Okay,
Overlap borrowing.
thank you.
Other questions? You look forlorn.
I was just trying to wrap my head around what you guys were saying. Like, I get it, but at the same time, like, you mean you borrowed the money in 2024, but it was for 2025? Like, it just happened right at the end of the year?
So broadband and public works building, borrowing happened in 2023.
Mhm.
Went on the books in 2024, and same year it was scheduled to refinance.
So it should have gone on, I mean, if in a perfect world, it would have gone on the books in 2023.
Correct.
For that, and so the number would have
Because
been,
the funds came into Village of Sister Bay accounts in 2024, so in the same time, the refinance funds came in 2024 as well, so it's like you double borrowing, but
right,
then you're like paying off, and that's when we run into like shift.
right. So you were just using like on a cash basis, this is what happened.
Yeah, and they do
Literally
this
within the
snapshot.
2024 year. But, and then the capital projects, was there 8 million in capital projects in 2024? Or was some of it like from the public works and stuff in 2023, and it just wasn't, it didn't hit the books till 24?
Yeah.
So that happened too. Will that happen in 2025, do you think too,
It all depends on the time of
of when it
any
gets paid?
particular project, when we go for the, if we go for a go bond right away, or if we get short-term financing and then refinance.
Okay,
Where I'm
Later.
confused on the chart is that, we can't do anything about capital funding that's already committed to.
right,
I'm trying to understand the expense associated to that capital funding, which I think of as interest or bond-related expenses, and that usually would show up in the debt service number, which is in the operating budget. And that's where I'm still struggling a little bit. It may not be that that's what they're showing there. That's why it's probably best just to ask the auditor. I wasn't in the presentation meeting, I couldn't make it.
it went kind of quick.
Okay.
I just have a random question that doesn't have to do with that. All of the funds that well, and I guess this is in the future, the marina and utilities, are those all enterprise funds?
Yes.
Okay,
Has nothing to do
with this.
with the budget.
Right.
Because there's no taxes levied.
We have one other question. The audit and consulting budget, we were significantly over. Is that because of the work that Bear did relative to the, after the taxpayer?
There was some
Yeah.
work that CLA picked up. Coaching, actually explaining.
Right.
Is there nothing else then? We'll move on to the next item. Okay. 6A2, okay. So what is this? Is this your new numbering, Sue? Is this how you number?
No,
Kind of,
it's between three of us.
yeah, kind of, sort of. Yeah, it was like, okay, what's this? And then
Okay. I just like 6, 7, 8, 9, just numbers. Anyway, okay, 6A2, Marina and Utilities, 2024 year-end actual to budget. Are there any questions on this?
I have a quick question, and I just noticed it now, so sorry I didn't really research it in the broken down ones. For water, for the water fund and the wastewater, or no? Yeah, in the water fund,
What page are you on?
I'm on page 12, at the very bottom, where it says water fund year end, and it says net revenue, negative 216,000.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, so it was projected to be a negative number? Which they make, is it just because we do have to increase how much you're charging people for water? Was it way more, did it cost way more than we thought it would for?
So Glad, on that page, it looks like it says that net revenue over expenditures was negative 216 and the budget was to be negative 55.
It was projected to have loss due to the operation, and again, utility is split between water, wastewater, and collection.
Yeah,
So the sum of all, that's what matters.
Okay, that helps me. That was my question.
yeah, I was like,
So it's divided like 32, 59, 9.
so because wastewater had a profit, it ended up okay.
Well, if I look at wastewater, they were negative 15, the budget was negative 71, so they were $50,000, or excuse me, they were about, yeah, they were $55,000 better than budget. So we still were off a bit.
Well, I know it's confusing how wastewater was a profit
Oh,
of
yeah, there we go.
196.
Wastewater was, so that's the net then? The line on the bottom of page 13, is that the net?
That's the collection fund, it's another fund.
Okay,
So in the middle of 13, you'll see that wastewater was like 170 grand
Plus.
over budget,
okay, got it. Net
Okay.
revenue over expenses,
which is significant. I don't,
Yeah.
that's
So do we
huge.
try to keep it, like, not necessarily profitable, but just enough to set aside to make improvements? Or because it's a revenue, like, I know because you're charging people in the village and you don't want to overcharge people, but do we plan to raise the cost of, I mean, do we
Well,
ever
the
try to
only
keep
thing
all of
that
them?
We have to deal with the PSC, the Public Service Commission,
Okay,
and they tell us whether or not that we can increase our water rates.
okay,
So it's a formula, sometimes there's rate studies that are done to help us determine that, but they have to sign off on it. And sometimes they say, no, you can't.
gotcha, and that's wastewater too, they do that.
No,
Wastewater is a little different, so we look at what it costs to run the program, and then for a little side, for, like you said, Bridget, long-term expenses we might have, like, we know we're gonna have issues with the sludge drying and what we have to do there, so we have to start saving a little, or putting a little aside, so it's not a big hit at the end.
Right,
So it's day-to-day operations and then that little savings account.
okay, which is
So
why
I-
that's the only one that's possible, which is good.
now that one, I remember I was in that meeting, at that board meeting, Megan presented that. We raised the wastewater bills to the community, was it like 25%, if I
Yes.
remember correctly? And you're saying, so in theory, that should be at least 25% over that cost. And those dollars get accrued someplace and we're earning interest on them for when the projects necessary come about, is that what happens?
Not sure where the money is sitting, Glad, do you know?
Yeah, either operational funds, which is like just a checking account, which we converted into hybrid, so it raises the same amount, with like interest, so the CD if not higher. Or it's so the way utility operates, they do have their replacement fund. If they find something, they replace it, or vice versa, or they set it aside for replacing.
which by law we have to have.
So yeah, they do, again,
I mean, I don't have a problem with what we did, but it seems as though that incremental 25% should be set aside and not usable for anything other than its planned expense.
That is what we decided at utilities.
But how do we make sure that was kind of the question? Because the way Vlad just explained it, if it's in the general fund, how do we know it's really not being allocated
it's
somehow?
not in general fund,
It's
it's not
not.
their fund, utility.
And it stays in the okay, so it stays in their entity.
Correct,
And do we audit to make sure that it's maintained?
the CL 18.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
This is just a comment, and it, just from my, former life and stuff, I was always of the opinion, or at least, was told that going way over budget was as bad as going way under. And it spoke to, your ability to budget, and so in the case of the marina, being significantly over their net revenue, I understand it's an enterprise, but just something to consider. I mean, I don't know if it's a pattern, I have no idea what the history is, and I don't even know if that it would necessarily hurt or help, but it's significantly over, $220,000. So, and there's a lot of expertise there, so
That's with the marina.
Which I think,
net revenue. net
well, they're
revenue.
trying to save to build a new building too.
Right.
And replace. and
I'm just talking to
everything.
budget.
Oh, yeah,
I
They have a-
mean, I think they kind of probably had to know that their net revenue is gonna be more than 52,000. I don't know why, maybe there's a reason, maybe I don't know. But, so,
I know like $35,000 was due to the changing into hybrid accounts.
yep,
Then lots of 2025 funds were recorded in 2024. So somebody just called in earlier and decided to book for 2025. That
So there's a shift. So that would happen every year though, 23 to 24, 25, you know what I mean?
It
That's
does, yeah.
But we don't see history from, maybe this is a pattern of, that's why it happens, because of a shift in the calendar for when you take in the funds and when, versus how you budget them, and I understand that's predictable. But I mean, it's been around a long time, and I would imagine there's a pattern to it. I don't know if it even affects anything, but
It looks like their daily docking and transient fees were over by quite a bit. They made way more than they thought. Their commercial docking, they made more than they thought. And my guess is when they renewed those contracts with the new vendors, they may be charged more.
Right, because the budget is not,
Right, budgeted amount versus year-to-date actual.
right,
These are the
because when
ones
did
that
they
were off.
sign, when do they usually sign the contracts, Julie? Spring?
Actually, they're in fall for the spring, and then they pay in spring.
it just, I mean, I
And
know
their
you're
interest was more, which is.
as chair of the marina, and marina committee, and I was very briefly. I think, it's just something to share with them.
They are sitting on a lot of cash.
Well, that way they don't have to borrow so much to go the way.
Yeah,
But
okay.
and I'm
I
not,
like it.
this is not a criticism, it's just a,
Well, they also have a lot of unexpected expenses. For example, right now at the dredging or when you have a dock
Yeah.
washout or repairs.
yep,
Hey,
So
we
they-
could be Bailey's Harbor.
Yeah.
Are they below?
we could be, we could be facing 300,000 a year.
One thing on the marina too, that I guess is like, one thing that I noticed was the wages and benefits from 2022 to was 174. In 2025, it's currently budgeted at 299,
Mhm.
which is like a 72-ish% increase over that amount of time just for wages and benefits. And with the season being pretty constant and slips not expanding by all that much, I just thought that was pretty significant.
You know why that
Increase.
is in there like that is because the marina manager has talked about retiring someday. So we created a position for an assistant marina manager to learn everything,
Mhm.
so that when the marina manager does leave, we've got somebody that's cross-trained.
Okay.
If and when Dave leaves, you'll see that go down again, because assuming his replacement probably wouldn't have an assistant, because the purpose was to learn the ropes. So after and assuming he takes that job, that should go, you'd see that decline.
Okay.
And
Or
there
you
was
should.
also the other position created that they budgeted for that they did not fill.
Right, we budgeted for a part-time maintenance person there, advertised it for a year, I think,
Right.
and never had anyone, so that is budgeted, although not spent.
In the 2025.
No, last year.
In 24, I think it's still advertised
Could have
though,
been in
and
23
budgeted for
too, which is
25.
hard to find.
But in the actual worst budget, okay, I see, okay.
So Sam is the person, and he's been, a huge asset and somebody that, and he's also, just by way of background and history, has attended a lot of classes, and as a result because there's a certain amount, a lot of learning, of course, but he also has to have certificates.
Mhm.
So I don't know anything about it, I don't know what, but he has to know what he's doing. And that Dave is, over the years, attended as well, so it's an investment, I guess,
Yeah.
is the best way to put it.
Okay.
I think, so personnel approved it, as did Marina at the time, because I think Sam was maybe part-time or something, and I don't remember, but.
One more thing to add for total expenditures for Marina, some of the projects got pushed back to 2025. They were scheduled to happen, but
okay.
they didn't.
So that would affect the net, yep.
Marina's very fluid, because you either can't get the contractor out there, or you can't, or there's more damage over the winter or something. than you expect.
You probably heard what's going on about the summertime, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So
a lot, yeah, I think
that's,
Dave talked, you guys have a plan for next year, I think, I don't know.
Yes.
You and everybody
plan.
else, lining up for, It's hard.
Anything else? Okay, 6B, budget directive.
So we do need a budget directive to give to the departments as they prepare their budgets, and that is set by the finance committee.
So last year was really clear that the budgets would be flat, correct? That was I don't think I've ever said, you know, and I've lived it through a lot of different situations with different companies where they said, nobody can add headcount. And I don't know I think sometimes when and I'm not suggesting we do that. You know, I think that sometimes when that ruling comes across, there's missed opportunity, there's missed opportunities because, so I know that there was a suggestion here, no new staff positions. I think sometimes that can hurt. I think you need some flexibility. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just giving those as examples.
Yeah, no, I know you are. No. But I thought it may be part of the discussion.
Let me ask you this. Well, I'll first make the comment that unless I misunderstood, they did a very good job last year managing to budget, those department heads. They underspent the budget they were allocated. So what the driver is, I think, for this committee at this point in time is to look at the property tax levy and how we make sure we are, keeping it worst case flat or reducing property taxes in the village. So you could do that and simultaneously give some people that maybe have earned it or have the need for incremental spending, the incremental spending. You don't necessarily have to do this across the board and say nobody gets the increased spending. You could pick and choose if we have information that we can review and we can say, well, maybe we go up a little bit here and we go down a little bit here, but this is the right thing for the community. Or this is the right thing for the village. So when you say a directive, it's kind of the easy way out to just say, hey, we're going to direct that nobody spends anything or they only spend 2%. Then what happens is you get department heads who don't need it spending their 2% and others who need 3% don't get it. That's the concern that I would have when you have a directive.
Sure, so in government finance, you have to give us a budget directive, and then let's say it's 0%, so we do relay that to the non-enterprise departments. They may exceed that, Mike. It's one of these things where they're striving for 0%, and if it's something they really need, they have to talk with their committee, justify it, goes to finance, goes to the board. So to answer your questions, yes, sometimes they really need it, and you have to go over 0. That is something they talk about in their committee, but the goal is if it's 0%, the goal is that the non-enterprise funds be maintained at the same level they are.
So I'm with you, and I think I understand this, but if we provide a directive as an example that says to you, the administrator, 0% increases, I'm assuming you have the flexibility to take -1 away from somebody and +1 to somebody else. Do you have that flexibility?
No.
Or is the direct, so
No, it would be Parks Department, you've got to come in at 0%.
everybody's the same? Everybody gets treated the same?
The non-enterprise funds.
So that would be parks, right?
It's not a lot, it's parks, basic
It's
parks,
pretty-
admin, clerk.
Yeah. There's only
I
essentially
think
3 or 4.
in the past, for many, many years, we gave the directive of 3%. So basically what that directive is to give staff and the department heads a ballpark that they are trying to strive to reach that goal, okay? How it all shakes out is a different story, but at least they know where to start. And that's really all that it is. And more importantly, in my opinion, it would be a 0% increase for this next year also. And what's more important though is the CIP. And what we are levying for in every given year. That is in finance, these January, February, and March. We had those meetings. We have already pushed out a whole bunch of stuff, evened out the CIP kind of over the next 5 years was my suggestion. Just as an example, so in the 2025 CIP levy was almost 1.1 million, okay? Then the 26 was proposed at almost 1.2, so it went up 100,000. And then 27, it went up to 1.35, so it was increasing. But then in 28, it dropped down to 700,000. And I think what's a key component is keeping our CIP levy kind of consistent as we try to catch up on all the projects that were put on hold in the past to do the waterfront. And that just helps everything else out. So you're not seeing the CIP, jump
So,
so much.
so. I'm-
Because all CIP is levy.
So CIP, first I want to reserve the opportunity to come back to the budget, right? Because the question I was going to ask you, we were 400, we were a boatload below the budget. So what are we setting zero to, the actual spend in 24?
What the departments are budgeting. Not their CIP, it's what they're.
No, I'm not talking CIP yet. Is this directive for both CIP and for operating budgets?
They don't
No.
know for
Okay, so let's stay on the operating budget, right? Where it's the operating budget, I believe, not the CIP that was down
Right, correct.
the $500,000 dish.
Correct.
My point is, let's look at that, right? Because that number is what caused us from either not having a property tax increase or having an 11% property tax increase. When we talk about this spending directive to the department heads, what are we basing that directive on? If we say zero, Denise, is it based on what they're spending this year, which we don't know what it is? Or is it based on some look back at 24, which was below
It's
the
based on,
budget?
it's based on the approved budget for 24. So if you approve them to spend, I'm sorry, 25. So if the 25 budget was $50,000 and you say 0%, you're saying you want to see your 26 budget come in no higher than.
So that's a big flaw. Just looking at that piece, that's a big flaw. Because they're $500,000 below, in January 1st of this year, they were $500,000 below the budget they had in 24. We took their budgets up in 25. How much on average?
It was 0% for
No,
20.
it was
0%?
It was flat to
So,
what they
so,
spent
so
in
25
24.
spending should be flat with 24 spending?
It's up to you. That's an example that you could do.
Well, no, I'm just saying, based on the budget, they have a budget for 25 that they're spending to right now.
Right.
And you're telling, I just want to make sure, what I thought there was, looking at the data, I thought there was about a 2% increase in the spend last year, in between this year and last year. I thought that was just shy of 2%, I thought, budgeted, when I looked at that, when I looked at the
Budgeted
budget.
to actual 24.
Correct.
And we don't know what actual 24, we didn't know
We
what
know,
actual
yeah.
24 was until after the budget was approved.
So my point is, that could be a real big increase. If they're spending the budget this year, they could potentially be increasing spending significantly from the year before. That's what I think we've got to test. That's something we need to know when we're making decisions. Do you understand?
Well, but let me,
Yes.
but let me explain something. Well, let me explain that one thing that's missing is, I think when they go in and do the budget, there is a projection in there. And we project where we'll end up.
I saw it. We projected last year in the summertime that we were going to spend to budget. And then when we look at the audited report, the financials told us we actually spent $500,000 less than that.
But there is a projection in there, and that's
There
what
is.
you have to do before.
Yes,
you're budgeting.
there
You
is.
have to figure out where you're gonna end up for the year.
But it was off pretty bad then.
But so I have the money.
You considering it was paid back from TIF. So technically,
Of 100-some thousand, I thought you told me.
150, that's the second part. The first part So $440,000 was payback. 150 was just additional one. 290 was the schedule initially. So we 577 savings.
You can say to Mike, you know, we're a small village, we have a staff of 16 people. So, a lot of times you budget for something and you just can't get it done. I'll give you a good example. We'll budget to have a plan completed, and I know that's one of them where we didn't spend what was budgeted because, let's face it, we couldn't get it done, you know?
Look, I hear you, and I'm not trying to manage this at a micro level. $500,000 is a material number. And it has nothing to do with the CIP, and I don't think it has anything to, it might have something to do with the tip that I'm not understanding. But right now, as I understand it, our spending was $500,000 under. All I'm asking is now that we're halfway through 25, when we say a zero directive, is it really zero? Or is it up from 24, 5%? I don't know. I don't think any of us know.
Well, in the past, we've looked at it as a 0% from a budgeted number.
But not what they actually spent.
Right.
And that's the
So-
part that I
Right.
struggle with.
So, well, and I guess it depends on if you've got a big project or not, but you're saying like, if we gave wastewater $100,000 as their budget and they only spent 80, and they really only needed to spend 80, would their budget for the following year still be 100?
Right.
Or would it be the 80?
That's
that
the
they
question
needed?
I'm trying to answer.
Right, I think he's saying in order to close the gap of the overage outside of the TID and TIF stuff, would we look at in the
And we will
future,
when we
looking
get
at
to
the
that
80
point.
instead?
We
Right,
will,
that's what I.
and there's
understood.
lots of things in the previous item where Vlad did the over/under, where you can obviously see that there are many categories that need to be drastically increased.
So that's fine. So the budget directive, what I hear you suggesting, Denise, is that it's zero. And what you're also telling us is that there will be a year-to-date actual review before we go into the planning process for 26.
Yeah.
So we would have the opportunity at that point in time to look at those actuals versus the previous year's actuals and look at the net impact of the increase, the decrease, or if it's flat.
However, yes, that's true. However, I want to caution you because government is a little different than private sector. And I know Louise, we had talked about this last year too. So like you, with government, like Dave, the majority of his revenue, the marina, majority of his revenue is the first couple months out of the year.
In
Then
private
figure it out.
businesses, you can have annuities where you're getting
Well,
paid in 1 year, 1 month of the year.
So my point is, you may look at something
Yeah.
in September, that could be totally different by the time that.
But you should be able to forecast it.
And that's exactly
I
what we
think we're
do.
just
That's what we do.
Okay,
wasting too much time on this.
Well, the other thing too is
it's
that.
$500,000.
But Dave, but I think the other thing too, that you should know, and I think I'm right about this, is that the directors, in this case Eric, so let's talk parks, it's a big budget. Eric would be provided with information that would tell him history. So here's how you ended up 24. Here's where you are year to date, at whatever the period of time is, because he'll be budgeting in July. So through June, here's your actual. And Eric, you manage this budget, you know what you still got coming, you know? So last year, year to date, 2025 budget, difference to budget. So year to date, you're at, I'm making it up, $100,000, your budget's 200,000. The difference is $100,000, and it's by, it's detailed, there's line items. So that he could tell, it's the second year he's doing it too, which is great. He can tell like, okay, then that's how you do a projection. Without that information, it's hard. And he also knows what's on order, what isn't coming, what kind of staff he's got, et cetera, et cetera. Then he can do it.
Okay.
And then provide, because that's what comes to us, because he's the one that's got to sell his budget to us. Here's why I need this. Because we go, in the budget process, we go line by line, even though, let's say the whole thing is flat, comes out flat. If there's a line that's up 10%, they're all looked at, like, why are you projecting this down? Why is it, whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But if you give them the right tools.
I would agree. I'm fine with this. If what I heard is that if we set a zero increase target or directive, using the right language, they target their spending plan for 26 at zero. And as we get into the budgeting process, both the department heads and us will have an ability to look at year-to-date actuals at 3 months. And we should be able to look at a forecast for that last quarter. Because we ought to be able to judge the performance of the staff based on their actual performance and their forecast. Three quarters, yes, I did, thank you.
Yeah, that's in the draft budget that you.
Okay. I'm good.
You might even see them go down, like Parks is one where I know every year I've been here, we've done projects down at the park, right? We did the gazebo, we did a bunch of projects that we got grants for, and then we do some ourselves. That was all coming out, that is attributed to the parks budget. Now, if we're not going after grants anymore, if we're not doing any special projects anymore, you're probably gonna see that budget go down.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's a good thing, because that kind of makes your community stale, right? Hey, we're not gonna do any more projects, we're not gonna do any more improvements. But I think you'll see that happen in the near future, so.
The other thing too, for the committee, whether you know or don't know, that money that is not spent goes back into the village. It's basically undesignated balance fund. And that is why, and then that's money that we can use as an emergency. Something comes up, we have a cushion there. There are guidelines, about 40% where we like to be of our budget to have an undesignated balance fund. And it's also the place where, was it last year or the year before, we used $270,000 out of our undesignated fund to bring that down, and we didn't have to levy for it. So we offset the taxes with money that we had because it was above and beyond what we needed. So I understand hundreds of thousands of dollars not spent over budget can be considered not budgeting properly. Sometimes it's just the way things fall. But it's certainly not, it's not wasted money.
I kind of like the village having a little cushion.
And it was one of the ways in our undesignated balance fund and some other things that the village had done where we were able to spend $1 million cash and not borrow and pay any interest.
I hear you, but when we have people moving out of the village because their property taxes are going up so much that they can't
They're
afford
going
their
up
home.
everywhere.
But we're talking about what we control. We're talking about the village of Sister Bay. And our rates over the last 2 years, I can show you the data, our property value tax rates were among the highest in the state, the increased percentages. 23 was, the year before last year was really bad.
Increased percentage.
Percentage increase.
Right, I think I can agree with you on that. But if you look what the average is across the state, we're below it.
I'm not sure that's accurate. There
It
is good data
I
that's
pulled it up.
available.
I have pictures of it on my phone if you want to
Yeah.
see it.
The percentage increase, the burden that our citizens had to incur, the percentage increase were among some of the highest in the state.
I'm not disagreeing with last year's increase, yeah.
And the year before. That one I think was tops in the state.
So is the discussion then that you two are having about, the village catching up, for lack of a better word? Do you know what I mean, Mike? wherever, in terms of valuations and things like that. I don't know. I just don't,
I'm not sure either. All I think we can control is what we
It's not a
do for this
great catch
point.
up. I agree.
No.
I don't disagree with either one of you.
I don't wanna cut it short, but we do have a meeting.
Yep, okay,
this
but
afternoon,
fielding these
and we have
questions
items
from
to
everybody
wrap
all the
up.
time, right, okay, sorry.
Maybe we could have a motion on that one.
What the hell's a motion? Oh, we're gonna, so I'll move to, give guidance to, have the budget directive be that budgets for 2026 show no increases over 2025 budgets, right?
Motion by Hausen,
Second.
second by White. Any further discussion?
Just clarification. That's for the non-enterprise funds,
I'm
correct?
sorry, for all enterprise funds.
All those in favor, respond with an aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Follow up to that. Because the finance made some major changes in the CIP. Can you share with your department heads where appropriate, where we have moved things out and changed things to department heads, just so they kind of, when they're talking about budget and everything else, because if they have proposed something in the past and we put it in the CIP and it was for 2026, and now we pushed it to 27 or whatever, I think they should, even though it's still an ongoing conversation, I think they should know what changes we are already proposing to those particular projects or equipment.
Sure. Glad you met last week and explained that to them. didn't you?
Yeah, I already shared.
Okay. On top of it, awesome.
Okay, and then for the new members, the changes that were discussed at the most recent finance committee meeting relative to SIP and stuff are easy to find, or if you want me to, I'm happy to send you a link or something so that you can bring yourself up to speed on, because we can't change the SIP, right? These are just recommendations and changes that, because the finance committee will change the SIP, but at least then you're up
So
to
the
speed
last-
on.
the last finance committee voted on a new
March.
SIP.
No,
There was no
No.
vote,
No
you
vote.
can't, it's in
Okay.
place, that's it, it's done. But it's changes for ideas for moving things out and moving it around, that was March.
Right.
And there was maybe one before that, and it's it's an easy read.
Yeah,
So you
it
can
was
understand it.
Yeah, I'd like to
basically
get it.
asking staff, if it was in there for this year, do not spend it, or don't pursue the project.
So I can send you the links, questions, just ask, but at least to give you.
And we
ground you
will make that recommendation this fall on the one for 26 through 30. Okay, 6C, COLA 2026.
So, I think everybody knows what a poll is. We can see what the personnel committee had decided there, so we're looking for directive that we can use for our budgeting purposes.
So we look at the consumer price index and to determine a lot of this, as Julie said in her notes, we won't have an update through June until July 11th. But 2.8, 2.7, right
This is
around.
for budgeting purposes only.
Correct. Oh, yeah, just budget. And
Doesn't mean that this is what's going to happen or
Absolutely
that
Yeah.
employees will get a COLA.
yeah, and then for purposes, just to give you guys history, the 2.75 was flat to the prior year. So 2.75 for 25 and it was 2.75 for 24.
Does the personnel committee make that recommendation and does finance have to approve it before it goes to the board? Is that how that works?
Right,
Yeah.
that's why the staff report talks about what recommendation the personnel committee made. It comes here, and then we may say we disagree with the personnel committee. Whatever number we come up with is gonna go in those department budgets. And it's not, the final is when the board actually
Mhm.
acts on it, right?
Approves the,
They
because
decide.
then it's reflected, they run the numbers, they do all their stuff, to make sure it's reflected then in all of the,
But for budgeting purposes,
Budgets.
it helps to know what
Yep.
number you're gonna deal with.
And so personnel looks at market rates, they've suggested 2.75.
Right.
I'll move that we approve the Personnel Committee's recommendation for COLA.
Motion by Laskowitz,
I don't feel like I can second since it's my committee, I don't know.
you can second.
Okay, I'll second.
Motion, second by Hausen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. 6D, sales tax.
Okay, so you read a little bit about this. Vlad is really the best one to explain this situation. So Vlad, I'm gonna let you explain the issue we've had.
Well, wait, before he explains it, do we all understand it?
Yeah.
What he wrote? Then you don't have to explain it.
Well, this is what I wrote. These are my concerns with the sales tax. Vlad has different ones.
Oh,
So what happened last week? I had to file sales tax for the first time. Sarah, our new admin assistant.
Yeah.
When she used to work for Wild Tomato, that's her expertise. She filed sales
She's a
tax.
finance person.
Yeah, pretty much like whatever. Anyway, so she knew pretty well the process. I asked her a couple of questions because the liability in general ledger didn't get out the same way when you apply sales 6% on the sales. I'm like, something's a little bit off. Anyway, we figured that out, but the filing process was missing a couple of steps. And again, it's not a problem, but what we came down to, we're going to change the filing process. We never include gross sales. We never deducted exempt part. So again, it's just like a sloppy work. We're gonna change that. But the problem is, so the sales tax was included. Like, for example, if you're charging $10 for rent, we have to factor out the sales tax. So backing out the sales tax, so technically you're charging $9.40. But we're charging same amount non-for-profit, $10 too. That's what the problem. That's when auditors like, hello, that's not okay. So I reached out to the auditors. That's how they started out from how do we file, ended up to be like, hey, we overcharging non-for-profit. So we still process the same way the months of June, May, but we're going to change things going forward. And it seems like everything was done like that for like a couple of years. So audit team will work on proper procedures. Things will change, but not right now. So a little bit later, but things will change.
So for the remainder of the summer, we'll stay the way we've been doing it.
No,
no,
So we'll
I'm
start, it'll
hoping
change
July
in
1st.
July,
This will-
July
Yeah.
1st. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So it'll be a separate line item, like whatever it is.
Well, we also
Plus
have to
tax.
update our fee
Okay.
schedule.
Oh, yeah.
and
And it will say
Includes tax. or-
include, right, tax included or plus tax.
Yeah.
Or for non, depending upon what it is.
we're not talking like huge amounts.
No.
It's just like,
It's just
Yeah.
paid. at the end
yeah,
of the
a
year.
couple dollars here, a couple dollars
Yeah.
there, but just to be like clear and, transparent.
Yeah,
And
easier
the sales
bookkeeping.
tax should be super, super easy unless you do it the way you've been doing it.
Yeah, we don't know why it's been that way for years. We're just glad that.
Just trying to challenge what.
Yeah, right.
So
Like
the
for
fee's gonna
years,
read
tax-
plus tax. Okay. Do we need to vote on that?
No, it's just gonna come back. It's enough, right? Vlad's doing more work on it. So.
All right, thanks.
Nice
Vlad.
catch, Vlad.
Yeah, and
Sarah catched the way
Thank
we
you, Sarah.
filed, but then reaching out to audit team, I'm like, hey, please, can you just run a quick audit on this process? That's when,
Item 6E, personal property tax collection.
So, you see the list here, you see what still isn't owed. What would you like us to do with this matter?
I'd like to make the same recommendation as last time.
Put it back in the paper?
We wait a year And we do the same thing,
So
in
ABS,
February, that we did this year.
ABS paid, okay.
We have one pay.
Do we put liens on, we don't put a lien on to guarantee we get our money back when they
Yeah,
sell?
When the property is gonna sell,
Yeah, but
we
it's-
will get the money back,
Yeah,
not until the property.
But Johnson
Okay.
Park,
The ownership.
you know,
yeah.
I don't know about, I'm not quite sure what the other two are, but,
One is in Birch Lodge.
oh, okay. So
What's
these
one of
are-
them?
They're condos, maybe.
Yeah, Matthew Pigeon.
So
We
they're,
probably don't send the collections in a village.
Good.
Yeah.
We can send it into collection, but
but we
Then we
pay,
lose, then we lose some money.
no, we
It's
pay a
not
fee
worth
for
it.
collections, and they probably owe us $200.
Oh, true. Yeah, you don't know. this weather.
I mean, the article, the ad we run in the paper eats up a big chunk of what they owe.
Yeah.
Do we at least send them a letter? Make,
Yep, several.
Letter,
But I
phone
just sent
call.
another one in April, glad it was.
March.
quite honestly, only 3. It's pretty impressive.
Well, it involves 6 properties, and that's so they no longer have to pay personal property tax, right? So keep in mind, this is the tail end of those
Yeah.
that are left from the personal property tax. Yeah, personal property tax list.
So I would give the direction to staff that, we address this next February. Or they address it next February.
So does that mean bring it back to the committee or send the article in paper again?
Send the article to the paper.
So would 6F do away with what we're talking about now?
No, so that's something,
So we'll move on to item 6F, then tax collection, municipal collection software. I think years and years ago, the village would collect all of the property taxes.
Yeah.
And then we would send a check to NWTC, to the county, to whoever. And it's just such a huge job, and the county, for a small fee, will just do it, and they send us the money. And bigger staff, better probably computing. And so we went with them quite a few years ago, and it's just too much for staff.
Yeah.
They
Well, and
have
as we
enough on their
continue to
plate.
have more billable parcels, I mean, I would agree, it's a 7% increase. I don't know the last time that they increased it, or I don't know if they do it every year, but
I mean, it's nominal.
it is. I don't even know how to calculate how many billable parcels we have, or whatever it is, based on the time that, pardon me?
1,900 plus.
Of course you know that, thank you.
I mean, sorry.
It's okay. It's good, thanks.
Well, I think that $3,000 you're saving on not
Yeah.
paying staff,
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, you're just
Yeah,
saving.
100%.
Well, and they have the
Yes.
software that can go zip, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think yes.
There's a huge issue with delinquent taxes too, so you will.
Yeah, you don't have to take care of like.
Yeah.
Well, the follow-up, yeah.
So is this
Because the
just
county
informational, or
pays
do we
us
have to have
all,
a motion?
whether
I don't
we get
know,
paid.
is this consensus or a motion?
yes.
I make a motion to increase.
To continue to work with, have the county do the tax collection and not do our own municipal collection software.
Motion by White,
Second.
second by Laskowitz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. 6G, tax bill notification.
You know, I thought about this. We sent them a letter to explain what happened with the taxes. So that's separate now. So explain.
Well, I wrote, we should have had a copy of last year's, so everybody could, if they don't remember, it talked about dog licenses, phone numbers.
Yeah, I have mine. I mean, yeah.
Website,
Informational stuff,
right.
yeah, is important. Just as a complete aside, I have a meeting this week with the SBAA to work with them on helping us do a newsletter, because they do one. And a lot of the information that they give is similar to what we might be giving. It's formatted, it's ready to go. Julie said that she and her staff would be happy if somebody else wanted to do that, so that we can come up with a quarterly newsletter. Not that we don't want to put something in here, but it's just a great way to continue to keep them informed. So this, let's see, tax bills are November, right? December?
December.
December. The reason I say that is because if we wind up hopefully getting a quarterly newsletter out, maybe the first one goes out for the fall or something like that, and they go out every quarter, should this be more, not financially, like, I don't know, if we start trying to explain TIDS to them, that could be hard.
Well, and then you'd have to get into 2 pages,
And I think
because it's pretty full already.
Yeah, you know, we'll say stuff about the Christmas tree recycling.
something that's really
Program.
appropriate for right then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Minor about
because,
dog licenses, if you have a dog, you have to get it licensed.
Oh, which I was gonna bring up somewhere, now that you bring that up.
So are
Can't
we,
re-
are we reviewing
can
the
I
Door
finish
County treasurer letter, or are we
no, we're
reviewing?
beyond that.
Okay, so we're looking at the tax bill
So do we wanna
notification.
put anything else in with the
I'm
tax
sorry,
bills
Denise.
that's informational for our residents? And we do a 1-pager that's very informative, so get your dog licenses, or, you know, whatever it might be.
I remember it from last year, I like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't think.
Yes, I think
I
we
think it
should,
covers what we need it to cover.
yeah, I think we should, and if we wanna take a look at it one more time before it goes out or something. You know, cause whatever, yes, would take.
Glad, can
let's
you
take a
just
look at
email that to this committee, please? Not that we will look at it now, but Glad pulled it up. And,
Cause one more thing
we
in there
could
is we're
talk,
gonna.
we could talk about it at our next finance meeting.
Right, if somebody has ideas, they could send it to us, and then if there are ideas, we can bring it back. Normally, we just try to do, like I said, things that, not a newsletter type thing of like the
I know.
news that's happening.
No, I know
But-
that. No, these are like critical, like, okay, it's that time of year, you know, check your smoke, I don't know, whatever it is.
Right,
But in this letter, and I get a couple of them from different communities, they're pretty close. This is where we showed the methodology by which we calculate property taxes, and we included the mill rate projection.
okay.
I think we've always done that. I know Bailey's does it too. I don't know if
I don't know
everybody
if we
does
do
it.
that with ours, we do not, no. We could.
I think we did on the back side of it.
Glad has it right here, you'll have to check it, I
Did
can't
we?
remember. I didn't think that, I don't remember.
No, we
that
got
one.
a letter from the assessors.
Okay,
that
so that
Oh,
wasn't in the
showed
bill.
that.
No,
That
it
was a
wasn't the
different-
bill.
that was a
from
different-
letter from the
Assessor,
assessor.
and they gave a certain scenario.
Yeah.
Which basically was extremely generic, and it applied to everybody very differently.
Yeah, it did, and so it wasn't.
That's true. So that didn't come with this letter. That was something separate and distinct.
Yes.
From the audit, from the assessors.
I remember when I got one. Ours. Anyway,
Is there any way to note that something separate would be coming? Yeah, and what we send out?
Yeah,
Like,
or not do
Well,
it.
Yeah, that's-
Sometimes the assessors don't send it out, so
Yeah.
it's not a guarantee.
Alright, so it sort of takes some of the pressure off
It's
us
because
to
there was,
notify.
The revaluation triggered. one of them.
correct,
right. Like Ephraim, right? They're-
right, we
They're
might,
doing it now, they may get a letter.
we didn't, they didn't do anything.
I think we should say something about the fiber optic project, since that's behind me.
Oh, I've had several people ask about that. Yeah, they should say that.
That's one that I can think of.
Yep.
And maybe I was gonna say an update maybe on the triangle, but that we will mail directly to the people that live there.
I think it's sort of a good idea if it's anything that directly impacts what people would be expecting from a tax rate, or tax bill, we should put it in there, right? I think like calling out what is behind shows more transparency, you know, as far as like what people can expect and where things are at. And, you know, I don't know how much we can put in there or want to put in there, but I think things like that.
Sewer rate goes up or garbage rates changing or
Something,
well, tax related. Okay, well, we'll bring that back.
Okay, item 6H, grant updates. So,
I can't believe that CMAQ grant that they told you that it was, That is. In the grant, I wrote bus. We wrote bus. The CMAC grant was, that was.
You wrote it?
Sophie Parr wrote it for us. It said shuttle bus, not man, never. I
Yeah,
can't,
Was it the form?
No, so on the shuttle bus, Louise is right, it was like a part, I wasn't here my part, my understanding is you wrote the grant, and then you were gonna find the bus.
the
and then
SBAA
village-
submitted the grant,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I have argued back and forth with the DOT.
Oh, wait, that's not true, that's not true. Tasha was here and the village submitted it, but we wrote it and Sophie Parr wrote it because she had a lot of experience writing grants for transportation.
Yeah, so DOT came back, their big things were, cannot have a fixed route if you want the CMAT. For what we applied under, you couldn't have a shuttle bus, it had to be a van. It couldn't have a fixed route, and there was something else on there. And they said, I'm sorry, Julie, you didn't meet Sister Ray didn't meet the qualifications, we're not giving you the money.
I'm pulling that grant out and I'm gonna call him, that is bullshit. Sorry, but it is, that's BS.
Yeah, because I started working on that, I think it was December, and it was January.
No, I will
many emails.
absolutely. Mm-mm.
Who are you calling?
Well, I can call, first of all, the guy that, there's a guy that, at the DOT that I can talk to, and I have the grant, we submitted it. It's all right there. So if it's all right there, then why did we get it? If it states what it is and exactly what, it was a fixed route, it's all there.
Then they should have denied it at the beginning.
Exactly.
Right?
My understanding, and again, I wasn't here for that, but my understanding was it's not so much about what you submitted or what we submitted, it was about what the program allowed. And because I'm like, well, if it didn't allow shuttle buses, why didn't you tell us that?
You know, why did you approve it? I have a letter from you. We have a letter. The village has a letter. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So there's a real disconnect there.
Yeah, so that's where we stand on that one,
All
okay?
right, I will call.
42 trail planning.
Wait, hang on one second. Sue, would you notate that, for our next finance meeting, that we will have a follow-up on that grant from Louise?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, and then, so you can see what the other ones were here, the grant on the Highway 42, $90,000, still working on the engineering there, 57. Actually, DOT approved today, the contractors that we selected, I'm sorry, the consultants we selected for that one, so that one's still moving along.
On that one, is it to engineer or to actually do the work?
So we had to enter a contract with the engineer as a two-party contract, the village and the engineer.
Yeah.
And then with the DOT, it was for construction services, where they oversee the construction. They then are responsible for putting together a bid, which will go out for the people that are gonna build it. It's
Building, because we have
horrible.
this Stantec plan already in
Right.
place, right? For exactly where the trail's gonna go
Right.
and that type of thing. Okay,
But now there's gonna be a new plan
a new plan. So the Stantec
by
plan
Robert E. Lee.
is no longer out there.
Well, it's this, I think it's gonna be the same design, it's just,
Okay.
they're gonna come in and they're gonna do engineering, it's gonna be more detailed.
Okay.
So, I'll be honest with you, in this one, it has taken so long. I think we would have been better off just paying somebody to run an asphalt path down there. If we would have been able to stay on private property, we could have just run an asphalt path and be done with it.
Maybe that's a lesson learned for the
Because it's in the
future.
right of way right now, is that right?
Because we didn't get approval, it goes in the right of way, and it just complicated it.
I own property along that, so, you know, I'm very familiar with the dimensions of the path and the property and setbacks and that type of thing, so.
Yes,
I
we got,
I think my recommendation would be to not start from scratch, we don't have to, and use as much of the existing Stantec plans, because that seemed like a fairly well-done plan and probably expensive, so
That's not our call, though.
it's not,
Oh, the
it's
DOT
DOT.
design?
No, it's Robert E. Lee who was
Robert.
given the
Oh.
contract, so
Okay.
it's for a set price, it's,
That comes out of the 906,
no.
it does not.
no, the engineering comes out of CIP,
Okay,
and then the construction services, the construction itself comes out of the grant.
so we sort of pay for it twice.
Yeah. But on the bright side, we only paid $20,000 for the Stantec because they were
Okay.
trying to help us to try and get the
Gotcha,
job.
to get to this point.
And then, but Robert E. Lee will rely on them. They've already requested a copy of it. That's their starting point.
Okay,
There's no intellectual property issues, are they? They can reuse it, can't they?
Right, they can
Yeah.
use it.
I would guess they probably just want to check numbers.
Yeah.
I asked a quick question on the one before, and this is just what I did look up. When you're talking about the trail that goes up like by the fire site, like up 42, the one
fire
that
open
connects,
heart.
what is it?
By Open Heart, is that what you mean?
Open Heart, sorry, I don't know why I thought it was.
Yeah,
It's
it's
gonna
okay.
go up the hill. Yeah, it's gonna go up the hill. It's gonna be like an elevated boardwalk or bridge kind of that
Yeah.
will go up the hill in the right of way
Awesome.
on, this side of 42.
But when it says engineering is ongoing, but then it says it's closed out in 2024, does that mean, that doesn't mean that it
They
stalls
allowed
the
us to-
project at all?
Yeah, so we had to do, a certain portion of it within a timeline which was done, and then the remainder of it we could use for the final engineering.
Okay, so we can still do it, like this
Yeah.
doesn't stall, okay.
sorry, one more thing on the High Sim Trail, because that does go through TID one, is there any like type of tax incentives or funding or whatever that we could potentially use because that is in the TID, the trail?
No, one where we don't pay taxes, so
Right,
that
okay.
hurts us, but the other one is, it does go in the TID, but we wouldn't use TID, I suppose we could use TID dollars for it.
Well,
It's
Yeah,
it's
money,
all through the TID,
right,
yeah,
but the majority of the money, but our TID money goes into right now is, aligned for other road projects. That's a really good question.
well,
Yeah.
in conjunction with
question.
that, and I'm one bias here as well, because the whole property there. Eagle's been building their building, which is running sewer and water down, that side of the highway, which could be connected. And go all the way down to the corner where the vet clinic is, right, where the
Yeah.
trail
Northwoods,
is ends, so, if there's a way to leverage to do both of those, if we have dollars to pay for it, it's just things to. I don't know
yeah,
if
so
it's-
we have the money budgeted, and we have the grant for the remainder of it. You have to look at that. That's a
Isn't
good
it,
point.
is it to our advantage to use TID in addition to the 906?
I
I don't
think because we already have, offhand, I think because we already have it budgeted and have the grant, no, we'd be better off putting that towards a project we don't have money for,
right,
but that's something we can talk to Adam about from
Okay.
there. That's a good point. Okay, it's a session stand restroom addition. We will, as you see, we'll be putting down for bids ourselves. Safety grants, minor, we get them every year. Comp plan, we closed out. And then the waterfront park ones, we did close out. Except for there are some municipal reimbursement funds left over to use on the counter and the 2 benches. Other than that, that was it for our grant activity in 24.
Okay, item 6I, municipal reimbursement funds.
Okay, so every year we get these municipal reimbursement funds. And you can see what the dollar amounts are in here and what they were spent on. So we are looking at having an allocation for 2025, what to do with the 2025 ones. We have, just wait, I gotta make sure that the 24 ones, 24 ones were allocated. So in 25, we have the 65,200. And the recommendation is that we use that for historic signage at Waterfront Park, wanted binoculars, which are the ones on stands. We may need leftover for the gazebo bench, the bench and the gazebo. And just wondering, do we want to use the municipal reimbursement funds for that? If not, what are you using them for? And are there recommendations on how we would pay for those projects without.
Maybe you should tell them what that money can only be used for.
So it has to be used for things that are basically enhanced tourism. So these are dollars created by tourism. So it goes back to help enhance, or not so much promote tourism, but enhance the tourism, I always say, experience in your community. So we try to keep them to, like at Waterfront Park, we knew the public would go down there, they would enjoy these facilities. It made sense to use those dollars to reimburse in Waterfront Park. Could you use those in something, just trying to think. You have to be selective and make sure that it is something that would benefit the visitor experience. So,
I'll say something in support of this. I'm on the Parks Committee. And Louise is the chairman, and Denise is on the committee, and there's been a really good collaboration with the Historical Society. And there's two neat things they want to do. I mean, this could be the beginning of what becomes signage throughout the village that we've seen when we visit other places. It's very professional looking, where it tells a little history. You're looking out at a view and they're explaining kind of the history of what you're seeing, whether it's, industrial work that might have been done in and around Sister Bay, logging. I'm not sure what's all going to be in there, but the Historical Society would work on the content of that, and they really have ownership for it. So these would be basically signage, very professionally done, ADA accessible, so you can bring your wheelchair right up and see this and still see the view. And then in addition, Julie brought the suggestion for these binoculars that would also be ADA accessible, that would be located near, at least preliminarily, they're thinking near where this vestibule or signage would be for looking at historical locations. And the Historical Society has been very thoughtful, and they have a long suggestion of what a walking route could look like going from one site to another. So if they put one in this year, they could add one or two next year, and they could make this all potentially look alike. And there's a series of ways that it could be funded. This is one way. The historical, that we could ask for donations. There's all kinds of ways it could be done, but we have a limitation on these dollars, right, Julie? That's what you're explaining, and this would be one of the ways we could use these dollars. And at least from the Parks Committee, I think we thought this would be a good use of the money, and it had been previously planned for by an earlier Parks Committee.
right, we've been talking about the historic signage for 2 years, maybe, a little longer.
Mhm.
So it is in line with that. Yeah, I mean, it's not something we would use this for, let's say, a new parks building or an admin building or something. It's pretty specific. If you don't use the money, you have to decide, okay, what are we gonna spend? If you don't use it for this, you have to decide, what are you gonna spend it on? Usually we try and discuss this earlier, like in spring. We didn't meet in spring, but you need to spend it or have it allocated by the end of 2025, so.
I like the idea, and especially the science and the binoculars. I think that'll be really neat, just for maybe future funds, just to throw like on the back burner list of things I think would be helpful. Or if there's a little money left over. I always think a swim ladder on the north side of the public pier. Because right now, I mean, unless I missed it the other day, there's no ladder on the outside wall of the public pier, and I think that's pretty dangerous. If a
Isn't there
kid
used
falls
to be?
in.
There
I'll
was
check,
ladder.
but the last time I checked, there wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know, there used to be 2 ladders. And
Are they
one,
supposed to, you're not supposed to be swimming on the north side?
But if somebody falls in, they have to go to get out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
On the
more
north,
safety.
Yeah, it's more of a
oh,
safety issue.
that's the wall that they had to do the repair on, right? The north side.
yeah.
So
the
just
one
that,
towards the
some
marina.
street crossing signs, I know they probably get hit occasionally, but especially the intersection at the top of the hill and the intersection by Birdos. I've had so many cars that do not stop for my kids.
Yeah, that's.
So just the thing in the sign, in the middle,
Nope,
It
never
says-
gonna happen.
you must
We talk
stop.
about that a lot.
Ugh.
But we all agree.
I don't understand that. And then the third thing, just on the back burner, I don't know if it's allowed allowed to be used to either add or improve public bathrooms at the village hall or the outside of the Marina building. I know once they redo that, I know they got funding from the DNR at one point for public bathrooms there. If they didn't for some reason, maybe
In
that
the
could be on the
new,
list,
when
but
they,
just,
do the new marina building project, we are going to have nice
Apply
new
for it.
bathrooms for the public, not the marina, but kind of replacing and expanding what's there.
okay, awesome. I was just thought
And-
if it has to be for tourism, I thought those would be.
And the Village Hall project has shower restrooms for the marina, which the marina is supposed to pay a portion of. That one, we're very eligible for a grant. As you know, we said not to pursue that now,
Yeah.
but that could help pay for that too.
I think just back burner thoughts, except the
It's a
latter.
little
I
stretch, but I
that-
think you could do some of it. The problem is with those municipal reimbursement funds, it's not gonna go far on a
Right.
on a restaurant.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah, that's why I was thinking of little things, but.
I apologize. Thank you, everyone.
Diane?
Bye-bye.
Denise, did we get word back from the, someone that says we can't do anything with those crosswalks? Because that was our conversation in the last parks meeting. We had talked about some safety.
First of all,
lighting.
fire chief doesn't want to.
Doesn't want the things in the middle, right? Okay, but that doesn't mean we still can't keep looking for, because I mean, that really, you brought it up first. I can't agree with you more, but somehow we got
I almost,
people jump right out between the cars there.
don't look,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
because they think once they're in it, they're safe,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like, no, you need to get out so the
Yeah, you have to
vehicles can see you, so you
Well,
can
even in
stop.
front of Al's,
And I
if there's
go back
cars parked
to-
on either side of Al's, you can't see them.
I go back to the argument that whatever the legal setback is, by a crosswalk where it's yellow is not enough.
Mhm.
Somebody almost hit me coming off a spring right by the library. I had to get out so far,
For them to see
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
so I could
Do
see,
you
I
mean
mean,
the set-
I'm inching out.
right.
You
It's
mean
the
the
same
setback
thing.
of the cars? So, okay,
Yeah, right.
We'd have
Oh,
to
it's
take
hard.
yeah, that's the problem.
four parking
You lose
spaces.
4 parking spaces around. Same thing happened to me in Bailey's today when I was coming over here.
So we're in violent
I'm
agreement. I'm just
halfway
wondering,
into
can we
Wayne to
keep
be able to
looking at
see
that
somebody.
though? We just gotta find a solution that the fire chief likes.
Louise is supposed to take us on a bus tour.
Oh, that's right.
I
Forgot
can
about
do
that.
that, I can drive that
She's,
bus.
yeah,
I
she's
know.
authorized.
When are we gonna do it? Because when he,
We can do that anytime. I'm available, just I can't do it. It's in service Thursday, Friday and Saturday. Otherwise, I'm available.
I think we should,
I can drive it anytime.
I think we should schedule that for some Monday, separate from our meeting, just like we did the walk around.
Yep.
So we can be at every intersection and know how bad it is and tell Eric he's gonna have to get out his pressure washer and remove the parking and yell at them because
And
it's just
again, it's
horrible.
It's everywhere. I mean, like, as I said, in Bailey's, and they have fewer crosswalks than we do. It's not good. You're halfway into the road to try to see who's coming.
So Bridget, everybody agrees
I
with
know,
that.
I'm like, sorry not to bring up that sore subject, we're sending it to parks.
Yeah, and even, and then it's really bad in front of Wilson's and Ephraim. I'm surprised that no one's been hit.
Oh,
Really bad, and the lighting there is terrible. Terrible.
Right now, the
And also in front of Waterfront, which thankfully is Liberty Grove, but in front of JJ's or now the Cleat, at night, that lighting is really bad.
Yeah, there is no light there.
Right now, the DOT is accepting grant applications for the Highway Safety Improvement Plan, which specifically addresses these issues.
They are.
I know, but how, well, unless we would find some other solution other than, because I think it's twofold. I think it's removing parking spaces, so.
Yeah, I would say that. I still think you need some
And-
safety lighting someplace. Maybe it's not in the middle. I get the fire
Well,
department.
it could be embedded in the road, but now you gotta rip up the road and embed it so that it's.
Well, or curb. Yeah, it means it could be to the side or on both sides.
Mhm.
That might be okay with the fire department. We have to ask them.
Well, rumble sticks down in the summer. That's illegal, probably.
On the state highway.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay, so do we have general consensus to use the MRF this way, this year?
So moved. Or it's not.
And-
Not, yeah.
Um. So I know Janelle always had a tickler file. And you did send me something about that referendum that was in your tickler file. Sue, do you have a tickler file? Or-
Did we have one more
Maybe I do.
item?
Yes.
We do have one more item. She's
Okay.
gonna ask something though about.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
Crosswalks, I think. Or the tour.
Mike, you made me lose my.
I apologize. I thought you missed an item. I
I know
apologize.
tickler file, but what was I gonna ask to put in there?
The
I mean, we-
crosswalk stuff?
The ladder.
No, because that should probably be addressed sooner rather than.
Bus
later. I
tour,
think That's a directive that
bus
Julie
tour,
will just talk to
I
Eric
wrote the
about.
letter.
DOT grant for crosswalks, crosswalks,
Anyway, well, anyway,
You're gonna think of it at 2 in the morning.
I will.
We give you
Okay.
license to add it to the meeting minute notes later.
6J Waterfront Museum lease.
So we're all familiar with the boathouse project and Marina Committee will be charging the Historic Society $10,000 a year lease for the renovation of that. They'll go to the board. I don't know what the board is gonna do with it. But if rent is charged, do we want to, the Historic Society can't afford to pay it. They're already paying the money in to renovate it. Some of the thoughts were the village would actually pay it so that it is used and open to the public. So my question is, if rent is indeed charged by the board, can we use municipal reimbursement funds, if there are any, to cover the contribution that the Historical Society would be committed to? And this would be moving forward, not this year, because
but it would be every year then.
it would be starting in 2026 and beyond.
Well, let me find it, because it was in our packet earlier.
Because I think the discussion was that that, the 18,000 or probably even more, had we, charged more, could have gotten more, I guess, right? The $18,000 in rent that we'd be losing. And should the taxpayers be paying, that was the rub.
So we get rent on it now?
We did until this year,
Not this season.
Last year.
last year, sorry, yeah.
So if you
Tim
look
Holbrook rented it for the season.
back on page 12, under Marina, and it shows that the Marina for the boathouse had expenses of $8,500. So
That's a lot more than the previous years. Okay. But, yeah,
So if they want 10,000, and first of all, I'm just not in favor of that. If that 8,500 would hold true moving forward, or even if you wanted to look at the previous year at 5,400, I mean, they are never going to have those expenses again.
true.
But they all, okay, so that was kind of what ended up being the number after there was a lot of discussion, sometimes heated discussion, because the marina owns that boathouse. If they were even to put 150 into it, they could rent and manage it better. They could rent it out technically for much more than they were making. And even if they still had 8,000 to 10,000 a year in expenses on it, they would still be making much more than they're, you know what I mean? Like, say they could make $20,000 to $30,000, I think easy, honestly. Like, if it's done right, like easily $20,000 to $30,000 a year
Well, 'cause of
after
the-
these expenses. So the thought was, there's other people on the Marina Committee who are like, why would we just get, like, we think this is an awesome project, but why would we give up a potential $20,000 to $30,000 income just to be nice? You know what I mean? Like, everybody wants the project to happen, but they have a hard time giving the building away for nothing, except saving on the expenses per year.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
So that was like what it ended up.
Is the Marina Committee split? Or is it?
There would have been some no's for sure. If there would have been nothing, there would have been some hard no's from the committee was my feeling.
And some were okay with that.
Some
so
seemed
it's
okay with
split.
it, some,
So it's a split.
I
Okay.
think that's why they settled on the 10,000.
right, and I also think the committee was open to, hey, because now we're donating this building via lease, whatever, I don't know, if it's technically donating for the next 20 years to be a museum. Does the marina have to pay regular property taxes on that building? Do they now? If they do,
No.
would we still have to pay that? So they don't now.
They pay a pilot, which is,
Payment in lieu of taxes. And I did check into that and Led's like, no, that's, we gotta leave that alone.
Okay, so that was
but
one of the
no,
things they're like,
here's the proposal though. There is value to that building. I don't know, what the pilot criteria was when we originally, I was not on the board at that time, I don't think. What the criteria was, for that pilot. And so if it's based upon is it based upon the value of everything at the marina? Or is it based upon its revenue? All the
Because-
property value. So that means the boathouse has some value and they are doing a pilot in lieu of that. So
so if the
Could
boathouse
we
is worth
reduce
800
it?
grand, but now we don't have it. I mean, we
you,
do,
you
but-
own it.
Yeah,
But you're leasing it. So is it worthwhile determining the value of just the boathouse? Because I'm sure our insurance people have that, it's in documentation somewhere,
mhm,
and possibly reducing the pilot,
as a credit towards the 10,000,
correct?
yeah.
And
I
that way we don't have to use municipal reimbursement funds. The Historical Society doesn't have to pay for it as long as they are leasing it.
Right,
And then the pilot is reduced for the marina.
So their out of pocket is less.
yeah, so we were
Am I
just, the
thinking not
marina
too
was.
far outside the
No,
box,
because that's what
Julie?
we, that's what we
That's
talked
what
about
we were
at
talking
committee.
about. Like, how do we make it so that we're not just giving away potential revenue? Like, you're literally potentially giving away $20,000 or $30,000 a year so the Historical Society can have a museum, which we love the idea of, but you can't just, if you're
If
If you're fighting for the
financially,
marina,
right.
yeah, I can't just give it away for nothing, was the thought. So we're trying to come up with creative ways, and
So-
Julie was helping with that, to how we can offset that $10,000 number that everybody kind of landed on that would make everybody feel better about it.
so
So
let's look into that.
that's why she came up with this, we came up possible, we'll say tax reduction or however it's worded, we thought maybe I think we paid like $4,000 to the parks to mow, maybe, I don't know, there was lots of ideas, but so,
But this would be actually based on something.
right,
Yeah, when we came out of the meeting the other day, it was looking into the PILT and municipal reimbursement funds as a way to cover the $10,000 in the event the board supports charging them money.
which I think if the board didn't, I don't think that operating agreement would go through on the marina's end. I think I would get like a lot of pushback.
Do they have the,
I mean, I know the board voted yes, the operating
Yeah, the
agreement, but
board-
it was pending with the number.
Yes,
You know
but
what
I
I
don't, it could, I think the board.
the board has
would-
the final say.
Has the final say, so
But they could, but this is a different, it's an enterprise fund though, so you guys, so the board could technically give away property from an enterprise fund that it has to support itself.
That's my
I think
understanding.
that's crazy.
Well, but,
I mean, I understand it, but I don't, I think it's a little
but,
nuts.
but the way, because I looked into this once before, they're like a subsidiary of the higher level entity.
Right,
I mean, it's the same thing
So
like,
that, I mean, there could be a governance rule. I mean, I think it would be good if we could avoid that. I think
Yeah.
Denise has the most creative suggestion that would potentially solve the whole.
And everybody's happy and.
Everybody
would be
they
happy.
out
Right.
the-
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah. But
And
yeah,
yes,
I
that's
think,
where it
I
came
think,
from.
I think the board could just say, no, just give it away, and they have to just give it away, so, yeah. And you sit on both seats, so.
I know, I try to argue for the committee on
You did a good job.
I think the committee was very supportive, I think, of looking into the pill.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I didn't even know that you guys talked about it.
probably because minutes aren't done yet. We
I was
just
saying
did it
that
last
was just,
week.
yeah, that was literally
That was
end of
just
last week.
So in the event, so the question is on this one, in the event, we do not find, we can't do the pills, in the event the board says, yes, they're being charged, do you support using the municipal reimbursement funds, again, beginning in 26, 10,000 of it to support the museum?
Too early to tell. No. I think it needs to come back on our agenda at the
we need to
appropriate
revisit it
time.
based on the pilot.
Yep.
What we find out from the pilot.
What we find out about the pilot and any further discussions the Marina Committee has, and that's fair.
I think that's very reasonable.
Just as a side note, Pilot gets audit every year, so I'm gonna have to take it up with Amber.
Okay. And so, yeah, Amber will have the dollar amount, or should have the dollar amount, but does she have a different dollar amount, or does she have the same dollar amount that we're insuring it for?
It's like,
Are those two numbers equal?
And would it
Not
include the
necessarily.
property side?
I was gonna say, and would it
Right.
So
increase
every year
once
it's
they
different.
renovate it?
Yeah,
Probably would
when they
want more.
calculate
Oh, that's true.
depreciation
Yeah.
at the end, so then you can like recalculate it back, even though you, so how it will.
Yeah, I get it, I
So
get it,
you kind of like.
Yeah, there's
charging
always
more or less
depreciation.
at the end,
yeah. So,
and it's combination, again, combination
Right.
of many properties, yeah.
after you talk to her, will you just give me a call?
Yeah.
Okay, and while it's fresh in your head and everything, you can share with me what the conversation was. I think Vlad I would like the new members to all have the proposed CIP that we have so far worked
that'll be
on.
helpful.
One thing I will note, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Denise, but one thing that in this packet for this meeting, what was discussed about the SIP at the March meeting is in the minutes that are in this packet.
Okay.
You could read through it just as a general. Oh,
Yeah.
I just didn't, all of a sudden it occurred to me, I'm like, wait a second, the minutes are, so if you want. it's
But I
in
mean,
there.
looking at
No, you
how
should
it's
see it,
laid
yeah.
out,
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
just
and
very
I
don't
helpful.
wanna
know it's a
forget
lot
that.
of paper, and trust me, you want it on paper.
You want it on paper and you should put it in
And
a 3-ring notebook. And because there'll be 5 different revisions.
Correct.
Yep.
I started
Well,
to listen
hopefully,
to the last
hopefully not
meeting.
that
It
many,
was-
because
Well,
we've already
maybe
had a
fewer,
pretty good
yeah.
head start.
But
So it
it's-
was in the March 10th minutes?
It's in the March 10th, no.
It's in these
It's in
minutes.
this packet because we just approved the March 10th minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was,
Today's packet,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm looking at today's
look at
packet.
item B.
The breakdown, they just talk about it.
All they do is
Okay,
talk about
okay.
it. There's nothing
But I
attached.
think,
But Denise is saying we get the
Right.
this
right,
spreadsheet.
for Andy, Bridget, and
Right.
Mike,
So when you
can
look at these
staff
notes and look at that,
print
you'll see.
out the updated
Oh, here we go.
version.
Or just, or you can email it to us.
Yeah,
Oh, you cannot email to us.
I can
You
email
can,
Oh.
you need to look at it on paper.
No, like I'm saying, we can print it out too.
Oh,
yeah, you wouldn't have
Well,
to mess around with it.
let staff print it out, put it in a ring binder. I heard you got about 100 new ones.
I mean, I'll take it.
We
Thanks.
have binders now. So that way you will have it a little bit before we start talking about the
Perfect.
CIP and
It's
can
really helpful.
absorb it.
Oh, 2025, 2029.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing I was gonna ask is, I cannot find, other than I got TID 1, a map from Andy, I cannot find a TID 2 map. Can we get maps for TID 1 and TID 2?
There's
We
a,
have to
there's a
print it.
TID map for the whole
But
village.
where, is it,
Where
I
is it?
couldn't find it in our website.
It's hard,
the office, isn't it?
it's hard to
Yes,
find on the
yeah.
website.
It's
Can-
in, it's in
could-
the appendix of our comp plan.
It's in the appendix?
It's in our comprehensive land use plan.
Okay,
So effectively, it's in the appendix. If you go in there, it's there. I mean, that's one way to easily.
You want me to, I can email it to you if you want.
that would be awesome. I'd like to get the
It's hard.
maps of both.
It could be-
And I know Andy was asking about it for two.
Yeah.
I think Andy called the state to get one.
You'll see all three on a map, so.
Oh, I think he called Heidi at one point. And she gave him one or part of one.
Because the state's got the listing of it and has a sequential number, or has an identification number, but no maps.
We have maps.
They exist.
Okay. Anything else for a future agenda that anybody would like to see? And
Is there any other prep you want us to do for the budget discussion? Any other preparation, I mean, other than reviewing?
just show up knowledgeable. That's it.
I think it helps, I know it's a lot of work, but I think it helps to know what was proposed last year, why it was turned down. That's a matter of listening to minutes or tapes. I know, I realize that's a lot of work, but
Mhm.
some of the stuff you see come back is because it was shot down last year.
Just listen to my phone.
What?
So I just listen to the old meetings like open after.
Yeah, when you said you listened to the plan commission meeting, I was like,
Some are a little dry.
One thing to add, I'm looking at the file, so it's gonna be in one file, 3 years of actuals, 3 years of budgeted, and plus, yeah, so pretty much like a whole bunch of information. I'm gonna upload that file somewhere, but where you can allow me to.
It has nothing to do with me. Upload it where you need to, lad.
No, I mean just. kind
Oh,
of
where you are
so-
allowed to, like a
Where I'm
Dropbox.
allowed to. So, let me just show you what. I'm doing.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn at 3:00. Motion by Berto,
Second,
second by
Bridget,
White. All those in favor?
aye.
Carried.
And Vlad, I know you gotta get ready for another meeting, but I have one question
Susan, do
for
you
you.
want to stop recording?